Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. This is Mujeebkazi and you're watching Washington Roundtable on VOKTV. We have a very special guest with us and I'm absolutely honored to have him on the show, Michael Kugalman, who is Deputy Director for Asia Program at the South Asia Study at Wilson Center. Michael, welcome to the show and thank you very much for taking the time out.
Thank you. Good to be here and good to be back here with you.
Absolutely, pleasure is all mine. And the last time we met, it was about quite a while ago. And well, the August 5th of 2019 that changed the dynamics in Kashmir, politically as well as regionally. And we were hoping that probably the world would take some heed to the action that India took to its Article 317/35A that has changed the life of people of Kashmir. Uh, Before we dive into that topic, that is our topic for today's discussion, but there is a whole lot happening in the region, especially with eliminating the Al-Qaeda, I think second in command, Al-Zawahiri, the killing that has become a headline in the last few days. And I was looking at your tweet, and what do you think that who facilitated this operation?
Right. So, that's a big question. I think we may need to wait until someone publishes a tell-all book to know the full details of what happened. But it appears that this was an operation that had been in planning stage for quite a few months, for up to 6 months. And, as you know, the U.S. has military bases in the Gulf region. And I think that the U.S. had been using those assets to conduct surveillance. But indeed, it would seem hard to believe that with no presence on the ground in Afghanistan, that the U.S. would be able to do all of the surveillance and intel on its own. So that raises the question of who may have helped the U.S. And obviously, I don't know for sure. There are various possibilities, including Afghan sources that may have helped the CIA. One cannot rule out the fact that you may have had some members of the Taliban that were very unhappy that the group was sheltering Zawahiri, and who knows, perhaps some renegade Taliban provided information about Zawahiri's location to the U.S. One can't rule it out. Some, including myself, have questioned whether Pakistan could have played a role in providing information to the U.S. I wouldn't overstate that possibility. I think that the U.S. and Pakistan, the relationship is stabilized, but there's a lot of mistrust, and I don't know if the U.S. would want to be working with Pakistan on such a sensitive issue like this. There's also the Qataris, for example. Qatar has had a good relationship with the U.S. and it has, I think, the ability to secure information in Afghanistan from contacts in Afghanistan. Also Central Asian states, other neighboring countries of Afghanistan. Who knows? Maybe they had been able to gain access to some information that they could pass on to the U.S. So ultimately, I don't know. But I do think it's quite striking that almost a year after the U.S. left Afghanistan, there had been no U.S. drone strikes or any type of airstrikes at all. And so finally, you now have one almost a year later, and it's huge because it takes out the supreme leader of Al-Qaeda. So it really is. It's remarkable, and it shows that the U.S. does indeed have the ability to engage in counterterrorism operations in Afghanistan, even when there's no U.S. military presence in Afghanistan.
Well, that brings me to the Doha Accord. Taliban have given guarantee to the world that they would not harbor any terrorist in their land. So the question would be, was he already there in Afghanistan? Was he brought in after NATO left? What could be the assessment? I mean, obviously, these are our speculation unless we know for a fact that somebody, just like you said, would publish or maybe release a press so we would know it. But probably we can all talk about it. What is your assessment on that?
Well, it sounds like U.S. officials have indicated that Zawahiri, and his family had been there in Kabul for quite some time, and also a number of analysts that have studied terrorism issues in Afghanistan, had thought that he had been in Afghanistan for quite some time as well. But the important thing is that he was discovered in Afghanistan well after the Doha Agreement between the Trump administration and the Taliban. And indeed, the key stipulation, the key part of that agreement, what it says is that you cannot have any individual or group in Afghanistan that threatens the security of the U.S. And I think that the Taliban would argue that Zawahiri, just by being there in Kabul, didn't mean that he was threatening the security of the U.S., especially because the U.S. no longer is in Afghanistan. But I think one could much more convincingly argue that Zawahiri, just by being who he was and his position, made him a threat to the security of the U.S. because he led a group that has attacked Americans and that vows to attack Americans. And U.S. officials have said in recent days that he was continually calling for more attacks on the U.S. So to me, it seems like there's a pretty strong case that the Taliban have violated the Doha Agreement. Of course, the Taliban says the opposite, that it was in fact the U.S. that violated the Doha Agreement, and it may have as well. For, using military force inside the country, I'm sure that violates it. But that gets to the bigger issue, a moral issue of well, is it okay to violate the agreement in order to kill one of the most notorious terrorists the world has seen in quite some years, someone that has a lot of blood on his hands? So really, it comes down to that type of consideration too.
There is also a speculation, and obviously it is all a speculation based on that. The Pakistani military chief made a call to the U.S. Undersecretary for the release of uh, installment from IMF. Was it in exchange for that facilitation?
Yeah, I'm a bit skeptical about those reports, just because it would seem odd that the second in command at the State Department would be in talking to the Pakistani Army chief about the IMF. It just doesn't make sense. The Pakistani Army chief has other interlocutors that he could reach out to if he wanted to. I'm sure he could arrange for that. Why the number two at the State Department? It doesn't make sense, and I don't see any link between that call, if that call happened, and what played out with the airstrike on Zawahiri, just because the planning, as I had said before, had been going on for more than 6 months, and the U.S. struck when it did because it had an opportunity. It had reportedly been monitoring Zawahiri's home for many days, waiting for the moment when he stepped out on his balcony at a moment when the U.S. was confident it could quickly send the drone out. So it's again, I think that quite frankly, there have been too many links drawn here that shouldn't have been drawn. One linking the Bajwa call to Wendy Sherman to this operation with Zawahiri. I just don't see any links there. And again, I also question whether that call actually happened between
Oh,
Bajwa and Wendy Sherman. Of course, there's been no official comment from either the U.S. or Pakistan about that call. No confirmation, no denial, just silence, which is sort of interesting in of itself.